It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Wednesday, December 20th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Health is Happiness, the Foundational Figures Word Study, and of course, commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? Yes, it is already Wednesday. It is the middle of the week. Hope you guys enjoyed your week thus far. And I hope you guys will enjoy your Wednesday service tonight. Don't forget, tomorrow we have Q&A Thursday, so get those questions ready. Send them to me whenever you can. You can DM me or you can put it in the comments or whatever. You can, send it through Pigeon or a donkey. I don't care. Just send it to me however you can, and I'll make sure I'll answer them for the Thursday Q&A. Now, if you haven't yet, leave a like and comment below to build our community for this video today. This is a Wednesday podcast, December 20th. Just super happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other each and every day. This week's Sunday message titles, there's two of them. The first one is, Even God Must Take Action for Things to Come True. How much more this is true for human beings. And the second title is, If You Don't Know the Lord, It Is Suffering. It Causes Fighting and Destroys Peace. So it's very, very interesting titles for this week. And the second one really kind of caught me because it's like, if you don't know the Lord, it causes fighting and destroys peace. And we see like the wars happening in the world right now. But then if you think about it at like a miniaturized level, like inside your churches, in your families, or between brothers and sisters, whatever it is, if you don't really know the Lord properly, there's going to be like real fighting. And there's not going to be peace in your house, in your church. And that's something I do think that, we've seen a lot of this happen over, 2023, where even inside Providence, we see kind of people who are arguing or fighting. And it should be a time of peace, right? Because we are those that know the Lord. But I thought it was quite interesting that, our actions will show how much we do know the Lord and how much, like if you really, really love the Lord, what would you think the Lord would want between you and your brothers and sisters, right? So I think that's quite interesting. And and guys, don't oversimplify what I'm saying, because when I say when people are fighting, of course we're gonna fight. Like this is normal, like little fights, arguments here and there, but it doesn't really destroy the relationship. But it's the fighting that I think it talks about here. It's the fighting that destroys peace. Right? So, there's a lot of times me, my family or my friends will have a little argument here and there, but at the end of it, we're still friends. We're still like family, and we're not going to be like, oh, I'm never going to talk to you again, or people, get a little bit snooty, right? But it's talking more about anything that destroys peace. And I do think there comes a point where we do cross lines, and of course, this is where we repent. But I was thinking about that as I was reading the Sunday message title for this week too. So it is my first day in Malaysia. I arrived here last night, and man, I forgot how humid it was here. Like it's such a tropical weather. I arrived at the airport with my sweatpants and hoodie on, and I was fine because you're in the airport. There's a lot of air conditioning. But the moment I walked outside, it was like you walk into like a sauna, and I got sticky pretty soon. So it's interesting because the last time I was in Malaysia was April this year. So this is my second time this year to be in Malaysia. Right? It feels like it's been so long, but I was here since January. Actually, I was here from last year, November, all the way to April. I was here for 6 months, right? And it feels like because of all the stuff that happened, it feels like I haven't been here in forever, right? So here in Malaysia, it feels like my second home. And now I would say, quite interestingly, even though it was only a month in Taiwan, I would say Taiwan is like a third home. It's really nice. Like I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of people I know there, and I really, really enjoyed my time there. So it's kind of like a third home. But yes, my first day in Malaysia, and those of you guys, for Until the End podcast, Daniel Baker does it. I'm here with his family, so we met for breakfast this morning, and I was actually preparing for this podcast at a cafe right across from their Airbnb. So I am enjoying my time here thus far, and yes, I am driving again. Now here's the one thing. After driving in Taipei, I think Malaysia is quite easy to drive. Like it's really easy. It's so much more relaxed driving in Malaysia compared to Taipei. Like Taipei, the one thing that's kind of scary is all the scooters, right? And sometimes it feels like the scooters are surrounding your car. Like they're gonna try to it's like those movies where you have all these motorcycles that surround you and they want to hide in the carjack you and stuff like that. That's what it kind of feels like. But they're like little scooters, so if I really wanted to, I could just take my car and ram all of them off me. But obviously I'm not going to do that. But after experiencing Taipei driving, Malaysia is quite chill, like really, really chill. I think what would be the most difficult thing about Malaysia driving? I'm not sure actually. Yeah, compared to Taipei, compared to New York, compared to Seoul, I think it's pretty chill and relaxed, right? So, one thing that's I'm finding interesting about my trips this year, because I've been to Korea for a month, now Taiwan for a month, I'm here in Malaysia. Excuse me, I gotta sneeze. Okay, I almost sneezed, but I was gonna sneeze. I have my tissue ready, but I didn't sneeze. I'm not sure why. So if I sneeze all of a sudden, forgive me. But one thing I find really interesting about my trip, all these trips I've had this year, is I'm not spending okay, here's the sneezes coming now. Okay, maybe not. Okay, either way. So the time I'm spending in each of these countries, it's all been a month, right? So it's not too long where I get used to everything, right? Everything in that country, but it's not too short that I don't get to experience the culture and the people and stuff like that too. And it's quite interesting because I'm getting a really good view of the country. And since it's short enough that I can, I've been there long enough, but the interesting part is I can actually feel and compare the differences between countries, right? Like even something as simple as weather, right? Looking at this time of year for Korea, Taiwan, and Malaysia, you get a better idea. Oh, this is what it's, this is a big difference between Taiwan and Malaysia. Oh, this is a difference between Korea and Taiwan, right? And I think one thing that's a big benefit for me is I lived in Korea for 5 years. So I already know Korean culture, stuff like that too. So this short trip allows me to just kind of have that short experience. And then, I've been to Taiwan 3 times. It was my 4th time going to Taiwan. And then, of course, Malaysia, I've lived here for over 2.5, 3 years too. So I know the countries well enough, but they're such short trips. It allows me to have, to easily compare between the countries. Right? So even, when I told you that, I'm right now, I'm inside the Airbnb with Daniel Baker's family, right? But they're visiting from Korea because they live in Korea and they're visiting Malaysia. But I basically I told them about it. It's like, oh, Malaysia's amazing. It's like this, it's cheap, it's this and that. Oh, you got to see this, you got to see that. And I kind of become like a temporary travel agent, right? And it's interesting because, they're here. And while they're here, I am testifying about Taiwan. And I told them, oh, you got to visit Taiwan too. Taiwan is like this, and it's got the nature. It's small enough so you can easily go from Taipei, which is super metropolitan, but then you can go to Hualien and Yilan for more vacation areas, see the oceans and the mountains. So it's quite. I find it quite cool. Like I've been able to see these countries, a lot of the countries too, and talk about like the pros and cons of being in each of the countries. Because one of the things that, we all notice is it's crazy humid over here in Malaysia, like crazy humid. Today's about 25 degrees, but because of humidity, it's like 28, 29 around there. And, the weather's going to go up and down. It's like the winter there's no real winter in Malaysia. It's like this all year round. But I would say one of the biggest benefit or the pros about Taiwan is it's a small country, like land-wise. I think there's more people. Is there more people in Taiwan than Malaysia? I'm not sure. Malaysia actually is the same population as Canada, so it's about 35 million. I'm not sure what Taiwan is, right? But the best part about Taiwan is it's the land is so small that you can drive or take the high-speed rail. So everything is super convenient to travel, right? And that's why I give my big recommendation to visit Taiwan, and especially for those who want to see Providence at another level. Especially all of us who are in Western countries, it's not big, And when you look at Korea, it's too big and it's hard to kind of grasp it. But when you go to a Taiwan and a Japan, you have a better idea. Like, oh, this is what the growth is like. This is what it looks like right here. And one thing I felt about Taiwan, I think even more than even more than Malaysia is Taiwan kind of feels a little bit more Western. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it feels a little bit more Western, as in, yeah, it feels like that to me. Of course, it's still an Asian country, but it feels more Western than Korea for some reason. Yeah, that's just kind of the feeling that I had when I was there. But it could possibly be because I was with a lot of members who were running overseas, like in Canada and the U.S. and such. But yeah, it feels like, I should probably open a travel agency, right? Giving recommendations for the best places to visit in the Provi world kind of thing. But there's one thing that's probably going to be bad about my ratings. And probably the biggest thing that's bad, the biggest thing that's going to be bad about my ratings is I would change the rating of a country based on how good their coffee is. So if the coffee's no good, I'm not going to recommend the country. As sad as that sounds, well, maybe I'll just say that I don't enjoy it as much because the coffee's not good. But Taiwan has really, really good coffee, and so does Malaysia. Both of we just went to a brand new cafe I've never been to. Really, really good too. So I gave it like a 7.7 score. And for those of you guys who know my coffee ratings, anything over a 7 is a cafe or coffee that I would go back to drink. Anything under a 7, I'm just like, like I don't want to drink this again kind of thing. But that's just, that's my rating. If it's over an 8, it's really, really good. And of course, 9 is like very rare to have over a 9 score, right? But, as I've been traveling over the last couple months, I think there's one thing that I was kind of recognizing or noticing. Like I was thinking about, Providence nations, about how fervent they are for Providence and this history. And what I notice is, and this is, kind of makes sense too, but is that obviously the closer you are to Korea, the more you realize like the 심정 or the seriousness of a certain situation, like what we're going through right now, and how important like the prayer conditions are, and doing the Daniel prayer 3 times a day. And you kind of see the videos. Remember on the Provi news, you see the videos of these people going to church at 1 p.m., at 6 p.m., or whatever it is, right? And you can feel it in countries that are far away, like Western countries. I think it's more difficult to feel the weight of the situation, how heavy the situation really is. And think about Canada, America, it's 11-hour flight. EU is probably 8-9 hours, or maybe less than that. Australia, these are all Western countries, New Zealand, and it seems, I feel from my perspective is it's much harder to really feel and understand the severity of the situation. It's not easy. And of course, one thing I really notice about Taiwan and Japan, obviously, is they are constantly visiting Korea. And it's because it's cheap. It's cheap and easy to do, where people will tell me, oh yeah, they'll fly there, stay there for a day and a half, and then they'll go back because it's that close kind of thing, right? And if you think about say America or Canada, you have to save a good chunk of money to go visit Korea. It's not a short trip either, because think about it, you're an 11-hour plane ride. The cost is 3 to 4 times more than flying from Japan or Taiwan. So imagine if you are a family of 4, right? Flying to Korea, just the tickets would cost you, just the plane tickets for a family of 4 would be like $6,000. And then on top of that, you have food, accommodations. It's really expensive, and it's going to cost more than a month's salary to take the whole family there. So it's not an easy thing to do. And it's very easy for a lot of people to say, "Oh, you should go to Korea every year," and we hear that a lot. But I'd say in reality, it's not that easy. Because, in the past, we would hear people say "Oh, if you really understood the value, you'd go every year," kind of thing. But it's not easy, right? Financially, time-wise, all of the different things you have going on in life too. And, I understand other countries that, especially say we're in Malaysia, the economy is not very strong. So even if the tickets from Malaysia to Korea are super cheap, but it's not cheap for people who are earning Malaysian money. You know what I mean? So for someone who's making US dollars and they come over to, Malaysia and they see the ticket prices for Korea, we'd be like, why doesn't everyone go? But the reality is, you're talking about an average salary that's probably a third of what you would get in say America and stuff as an average salary, maybe even a fourth of what you'd get, right? So yeah, I would, when I was in Korea and in Taiwan, there's much more urgency and importance of the prayer conditions. And it's very interesting to see the difference in people's thoughts when it comes to these prayer conditions too, right? Because like I would say, especially for myself, in order for me to really do a good prayer condition, I need to feel or really understand that condition well, like how crazy the situation really is. And like that's why, Westerners want more transparency. They want to know what's going on, right? But like in Asian countries, it's more hierarchy and it's more groupthink. So if someone does it, everyone does it. Like if someone says, oh, it's really dire, then everyone's like, oh my gosh, and everyone gets into it. But in the Western countries, you got to be more transparent. And the more transparent you get, the more we can pray, right? And that's kind of one of the reasons why I want to be way more transparent on this podcast, because it's mainly for English-speaking people who've been in the Western countries and stuff like that too. And, once a Westerner knows like all the details and stuff that's going on, it becomes a lot easier for us to get into something, right? And you know what? Maybe I could say, because we learn the two olive trees lesson, and the two olive trees lesson is interesting because we always have external and internal witnesses or external internal leadership, right? And maybe I could say, I'm not going to say maybe, but this is what I feel, is that Asian countries are much more shamanic than Western countries. Like they feel more, like they kind of, they have that sense, right? And if I were to say, if there were olive trees, the East would be the spiritual and the West would be the physical, right? And like if I were making a comparison of the West and the East, I would say the West is kind of like how I think, very reasonable and rational, calculating. They want to know everything first, very transparent. They want to know before making a decision. Where in the East, it seems that people can really feel more from little that has been said, and they can easily, get on board to something with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Where in the West, it's not that easy, and it's not that easy to feel. And it's kind of something I've been thinking about as I've been traveling. Like Asian countries, much more internal. Western countries, more external and physical. And definitely, one is not better than the other, but both are absolutely necessary in this physical world that we're living in today, right? Both are absolutely necessary for the success of this history. Like, even if you have the greatest internal witnesses, if there's no external witnesses to bring the people to the internal witnesses to preach, then it's not going to work. But it's also on the flip side is if you only have external, then who are the ones that are going to be like, hey, we lived with Sunsim. We were there when we saw Sunsim say this or that. Oh, we saw this happen. It's very internal, right? Like Pastor Bumsuck too lived together with Sunsim. He has all these amazing stories, right? The ones on the internal side will understand more of the in-depth what's going on behind the scenes, where the external is understanding what the people in the world want, and we're the ones that have to kind of bring these people to the internal, right? And yeah, who's gonna like if you go to the Western countries, how many of them have witnessed how Sunsim lives every day, what he did, what he said, right? And like I talked about this yesterday, many don't even can speak the language, right? So it's very interesting to see the difference between two cultures and two peoples. But you look at it and say it's absolutely necessary, which made me think about things a little bit more deeply, okay? And you know how I talked about the other day, the struggle between bringing providence into a Western country compared to it's easier in an Asian country with an Asian culture, right? And maybe the next thing we should be thinking about is not so much about, like maybe, like my feeling is you'll have these, like say Korea comes over to America and they try to make it just like Korea, or they try to make it very, very internal. But America is not internal. America is external, right? So if we recognize the West as an external witness and making sure that they thrive in their area, in their position, it would be much easier than trying to make them like an internal witness. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking that could be one of the things where if we do not recognize positions, right? Because the external is going to do the external and the internal's got to do the internal. That's their positions, like body parts, right? We're all part of the same body, but we all have different parts where the heart is pumping the blood, but the hands and the feet are on the outside, touching and feeling, walking around and stuff like that too. And we need to recognize that there is that big difference, right? So I think maybe, like in my head, I was like, because there's this difference, maybe the East and the West have to recognize each other's positions, not try to be exactly the same as each other, but recognizing themselves, right? Like knowing their identity. And, because one of the things is because the West is more external, they need to thrive as external witnesses. So that's something that I was thinking about, and I'm hoping, maybe we can think about this a little bit more deeply, right? Because if both sides do their job, both the external and the internal, then the history should be able to explode even more, and each of them will play their role and such too. So that I find is, it was quite interesting that I'm recognizing this as I am, traveling around different places, different countries too. The poll has been up just for a couple hours now because, I do wait a little bit before to put the poll up. So have you been blessed in December? And interesting so far, we have like 73% have received tons of blessings. And then the next is 18% have not received any blessings yet. And then 9% have received blessings, but kind of some, not a lot kind of thing. So the biggest is the yes and the no, right? You either received a lot or you haven't received it yet, right? Which is 91%. Of the people are voting in one of those two things, but the vast majority, 3/4 of the people have been receiving a ton of blessings. But so far it's only 11 votes. So these numbers are probably going to be evening out as they're going to be evening out as more and more people vote, because I think there's probably going to be a lot more people in the yes. They receive some. Like I don't think that's going to be that small for long. That's just my feeling. Yeah. So it's my beginning of my trip over here in Malaysia. I still have a lot of things I'm thinking about when it comes to Taiwan too, because there's just too much that I experienced there, and I do hope that I can go back there. Yeah, I do hope that I can go visit there too. It's interesting because in Malaysia I want to relax. It's very chill, right? In Taiwan, I want to run. If that makes sense. Yeah, that's the difference in the feeling there. I want to run kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of the difference I've seen between the both. Maybe I got to think to myself is maybe not too healthy if I'm going to be in a place that's too relaxed, right? But maybe I want to be in a place where I can actually run kind of thing. So I just find it a little bit different, but that's just my feeling at the moment. Who knows? Things will change as I think about it more deeply as this trip moves on more and more. Okay. So yeah. That's kind of a couple things I want to talk about for this Wednesday podcast. Hope you guys have been enjoying it. Before we get into today's foundational figures of Christianity, we're going to go over a really, really important person that has to do with the Reformation. And this is like 100 years even before Martin Luther was born. We're going to go into John Wycliffe's life and his works and what he did to build Christianity, right? One of the founding fathers or the founding figures of Christianity. So before we get into John Wycliffe's life and his works, let's move into the first break of the day.
When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. Never thought that living could be easy, so you taught me right from wrong. Now I'm free to be full of love, full of hope. I'm empty of all things. I'm living to make everyone come follow me. This is a life worth living that I know. If I love someone else, what would he give me though? It's like I'm floating on clouds, my feet don't touch the ground. Life with you is like heaven, look at what I found. You said believe in me, don't change and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best. I'll step to the west. I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world in my hands, and the universe is my name. It's yours. Can't escape from your love. It's yours. It's yours. Can't escape from your love. It's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world in my hands, and the universe is my name. It's yours. Can't escape from your love. It's yours. It's yours. Can't escape from your love. It's yours. When I look at you, doorstep. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is my net. It's yours, can't escape from my love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from my love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is my net. It's yours, can't escape from my love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from my love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, 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 the whole universe.
All right, so let's move into today's word study. And of course, every Wednesday we have the foundational figures of Christianity. And today we're going to go over John Wycliffe, okay? And he's a very, very big reformer. He was the guy that they actually call him the morning star. Okay, so let's get into John Wycliffe's life. So John Wycliffe, one thing you have to know is he's the one that basically sets the groundwork for the Protestant Reformation. And he's the one that kind of first started to criticize the Roman Catholic Church. And he was the first to translate the Bible into English, and this was 100 years before Martin Luther. Okay, so let's take a look at John Wycliffe's life and his importance. Okay, so they call him the Reformation Morning Star. So John Wycliffe, heralded as the Morning Star of the Reformation, was the leading philosopher of the 14th century and an English priest. Now, there are many reformers throughout history of Christian church, and all the great ones that we've talked about in the past too. They all come from within the Roman Catholic heritage, right? So, and their purpose wasn't to set out a new religion or to make a reformation or to break free from the Catholic Church or any new denominations. They kind of just passionately desired that the church gets better. They reform the church from within and correct the abuses and the corruption that crept in over many generations. So in the 16th century, there was a drastic need for reform and correction of religious abuses, and basically that started with Martin Luther, Calvin, and Zwingli, right? And we've already done Calvin, we've already done Luther. Zwingli we could probably look at in the future too, but in order for these great figures like Luther and Calvin and Zwingli to do their work, there had to be some groundwork laid out first before they can actually make the real Reformation, right? And that's where John Wycliffe comes in. So if you look at John Wycliffe, he was born in the 14th century, okay? And if you were living in John Wycliffe's time, you would have found many of the same uncertainties and pressures that are common to what's happening today, right? Like seismic shifts, seismic shifts in society, like the Black Plague, right? It swept across England and Europe, and in some places wiped out a third of the population. And also there was the 100 Years' War between England and France that basically sapped all the energy and resources from the countries and the people. Wage controls locked the poor into like a marginal existence and led to the violent peasants' revolt in England in 1381. So kind of this is the time that Wycliffe was living in, right? Now, Wycliffe was someone who cared deeply for the poor and common folk and railed against the abuses of the church. Okay, so the church owned over a third of the land in England, and clergy were often illiterate and immoral. So high offices in the church were bought or given out as political plums, but the problems went even deeper than that. Wycliffe, devoted student of the Bible, saw that some of the doctrines of the church had departed from biblical moorings. Right, so based on his study of the scripture, John Wycliffe wrote and preached against the teachings about purgatory, the sale of indulgences, and the doctrine of transubstantiation, which basically means that, the moment you put the wafer in your mouth, it turns into Jesus's flesh, literally kind of thing, right? So, this for Wycliffe, this was too much. So, it was too much, meaning Wycliffe was told that he was doing too much, that even his highly placed political friends deserted him. Church authorities had him banished from his university teaching post at Oxford, but in essence, it was kind of a blessing. His exile turned into like a liberation. So some of his students joined him at the parish church in Lutterworth, and they undertook the monumental task of translating all the scriptures into English, working from a handwritten Latin translation that was over 1,000 years old. So they continued Wycliffe's practice of training poor preachers known as lollards. Now, what's a poor preacher? These are the people that took the words out to the common people across the land. So think for a moment, right? Like before this time in the 14th century, you couldn't own your own Bible. It wasn't even available in your language, right? So what if you were taught that the Bible was only for church officials to study and interpret and not for the common person? And that's kind of what was happening at Wycliffe's time in England, right? So for Wycliffe, nothing was more important than getting the Bible and its message into the language and hearts of the people. And he knew the scriptures would change lives. So as Wycliffe put it, God's words will give men new life more than the other words that are for pleasure. So, he also said, "O marvelous power of the divine seed which overpowers strong men in arms, softens hard hearts, and renews and changes into divine men, those men who had been brutalized by sins and departed infinitely far from God. Obviously, such miraculous power could never be worked by the work of a priest, if the Spirit of life and the eternal Word did not, above all things else, work with it," right? So that's what Wycliffe put in there. It's like, hey, this is the words of God. It's going to change people's lives if they put it into their hands, right? So what eventually happened to him, because here he is trying to translate the Bible into English. But remember, the printing press wasn't even invented by this time. So John Wycliffe was condemned by the church, died of a stroke on New Year's Eve in 1384. But his memory and influence continued so strong that he was formally condemned again 30 years later at the Council of Constance, right? So think about it. He had such an impact on people that even 30 years after his death, they condemned him again. So what did they do 30 years later? Number one, they said all of his writings had to be destroyed. Number two, they would go to his grave, exhume his bones, and then burn the bones, and then those ashes will be thrown into the nearby river. Like that's how much of an impact he was making. And somehow the church authorities thought that by burning his remains, they might like erase his memory, like people won't remember him. But even like you got to think of how bizarre that is to go to that extreme, right? But they could not stop the hunger for God's word and truth that Wycliffe had uncompromisingly advocated, right? There was someone who chronicled this time. His name was Fuller, and he wrote this: "They burnt his bones to ashes and cast them into the Swift, a neighboring brook running hard by. Thus the brook hath conveyed his ashes into Avon, Avon into Severn, Severn into the narrow seas, and they into the main ocean. And thus the ashes of John Wycliffe are the emblem of his doctrine, which now is dispersed the world over." So it's basically saying that, yeah, they tried to get rid of him. They put him into the river, but the river goes into the ocean, which symbolizes the world, and now all of his teachings and stuff are going to go to the world, right? And you got to understand that, his mission goes on today. Think about how many places have the Bible readily available. Almost in America, you'll have almost every hotel is going to have a Bible in their room, right? And this is why they call him the Morning Star Reformer, right? And because of him, there's actually even an organization today, a missionary organization called Wycliffe Bible Translators, and their aim is to translate the Bible into every one of the over 2,500 remaining languages on earth that don't have the scriptures. That's incredible, right? That's what their goal is, trying to finish what John Wycliffe was trying to do. John Wycliffe, he didn't live that long either. He lived for 50 some odd years, less than 60, right? And one of John Wycliffe's quotes are, "Trust wholly in Christ, rely altogether on his sufferings, beware of seeking to be justified in any other way than by his righteousness. Faith in our Lord Jesus Christ is sufficient for salvation," right? So the word that John Wycliffe was dying, John Wycliffe was dying whipped like storm winds across England, and December 30th, 1384, many of the clerics, which were his enemies, many of them were his enemies, crowded into his room at Lutterworth, and if they hoped to hear some last word or recantation from him, but they were disappointed because John, he didn't say it. So 2 days earlier, he had grown numb, collapsed while saying Mass, and when he came to from his second stroke, he was paralyzed and unable to speak, and that's why he couldn't say anything. So, John Wycliffe was the most famous priest of his day, and his learning was immense, and he had been a leading scholar at Oxford and a chaplain to the King of England. And more to the point, he spoke out boldly against the errors of the popes, the organizational hierarchy of the Roman Church, and the corruption of the clergy in his day. And he criticized not only the organization of the medieval church, but its theology as well, and argued for return to the scriptures. So, it's very, very interesting to see the type of life that he has. And he was someone who advocated the word of God. You have to get in your own language, right? So under his direction, the Bible was translated into English for the first time, and he did not complete. He didn't complete it in his lifetime, but all of his associates completed in 1395, right? And that's 11 years after his death, and he was repeatedly condemned, and like we heard, he was repeatedly condemned his works, like the English translation. They burned it by church authorities. Copies of Wycliffe's Bible continued in use for over a century until printed Bibles took their place, which is when the printing press was invented. And you have to also know that Wycliffe was someone that actually heavily influenced William Tyndale, who made the first printed translation of the New Testament into English, right? So it's very, very interesting. What John Wycliffe's life, because remember, like I said, he died of a stroke in the last day of the year, December 31st, and the religious authorities had never excommunicated him because they feared public opinion. The people loved John Wycliffe, and his fame was international, so he was buried in consecrated soil. But of course, 30 years later, they took his bones out and burned him, right? So they could only do it 30 years later when the sentiment kind of like died down a bit. But they tried their best to burn his bones, but they couldn't end his influence. And John Foxe once said in his Book of Martyrs, we went over John Foxe's Book of Martyrs before, he said that though they dug up his body, burnt his bones, and drowned his ashes, the word of God and the truth of his doctrine with the fruit and success thereof, they could not burn, which yet to this day remains. Right? So this is John Wycliffe, very influential, and 100 years before even Martin Luther was born, but he's the first to actually start going against the Catholic Church, saying that it was wrong, and he was excommunicated. He was taken away from his post. But it kind of reminds me of like who has the bravery or the courage, like especially even what happened this year. Like maybe in the past, how many people could say something bad about like KJS and stuff like that too, right? So when you think about that, it takes a lot of bravery and it takes a lot of that courage and power to do so. And here was John Wycliffe doing what he was inspired by God to do, and it has a lasting impression even today, right? Like I'm still shocked that the Wycliffe Bible Translating Organization their goal is to translate the Bible into the 2,500 remaining languages that the Bible has not been translated into. So I think that's pretty incredible. All right. So there it is, guys. That is John Wycliffe. Hope you guys really enjoyed that time of learning about these foundational figures of Christianity. And I hope it's something that, I don't do the Old Testament because we have the Old Testament. We read the Old Testament, so we see all these foundational figures. But a lot of times we don't know the foundational figures of Christianity very well, and that's why I kind of go over these ones here, okay? So if you have any comments or anything else, leave them below. Would love to hear what you guys think. So that means let's move into the second break of the day.
我看见主的模样 So alive, so alive 我听见主的声音 So clear, so clear 他的爱融化我心使我灵魂安然平静那话语充满能力使我能看见改变的神迹 看见，理智前进着 So alive, so alive 我听见话语满溢着 So clear, so clear 主的爱始终如一，不曾改变，使我能完全沉浸主话语，确实不必，使我能体会神爱的旨意。多幸运，在新时代里与主一起经历风雨，一生用尽真心持守我对天的约定。属天的路我越走越确信，感谢圣灵强烈引导我心灵，当代有主同在宝贵时机，我会怀抱感谢忠诚实践到底，主啊我爱你。多幸运，在新时代里与主一起经历风雨，一生用尽真心持守我对天的约定。多幸运，在新时代里与主一起经历风雨，一生用尽真心持守我对天的约定。我看见主的模样 So alive, so alive
Okay, so let's get into today's final segment. And of course, every Wednesday we have Health is Happiness. And this is once again Yuen Yu over there in Singapore. And she is going to be doing a segment on functional health advice for people in their 50s and above. Okay, so a lot of you might think to yourself is like, oh, is this really something that's beneficial for me if I'm so young? But I also think it's something that you need to know, especially when it comes to your parents, your grandparents, or I'm not sure you'll have grandparents in their 50s, but it's good to know so we could take care of the people that are older than us also. All right, so everyone, please welcome all the way over there from Singapore. This is Yuen Yu with Health is Happiness.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuen Yu. I'm from Singapore and I'm finishing up my studies in physiotherapy. On today's topic of health is happiness, I'll be sharing one part of a 3-part series on health advice for older adults, especially those aged 50 and above. But this also does pertain to the rest of the adult population. For the first part series, I will share on how to care for our joints. I'd like to give thanks to the Holy Trinity for this opportunity to share, as well as Julius and Pastor Sky for this platform. As a disclaimer, this is general health advice. If you have any existing medical conditions, do consult a medical professional. Without further ado, I'll begin. Firstly, what is a joint? A joint is the part of a body where 2 or more bones meet to allow movement. For instance, your knee joint connects your thigh bone to your shin bone to allow you to bend and straighten your knee. Then, why should we care for our joints? If our joints aren't taken care of, it can result in joint discomfort, pain, feelings of stiffness, achy, a grating sensation, etc. And this may affect the function of our joint, limiting our ability to sit, stand, move around, and do sporting activities. therefore affecting our quality of life. Some examples of joint conditions include arthritis, of which within this, the most common form is called osteoarthritis. This refers to cartilage within a joint that breaks down and there are underlying bone changes. Then, what actually causes this joint pain is that there are various factors, but the common ones that are specific to osteoarthritis include repetitive stress on a joint without proper strengthening of the muscles around that joint. So this could be due to you having a heavy occupational workload that requires you to bend your knees a lot, to squat down and pick things up. Another cause could also be contributed due to aging. As you get older, the risk of developing joint conditions and osteoarthritis increases. Gender also plays a part, as women are more likely to develop osteoarthritis as compared to men, especially after the age of 50. Another contributing factor would be additional weight, because additional weight adds more stress on joints. Another factor includes excessive running, of which later on I'll elaborate how much is too much. And lastly, one big factor is also genetics. For instance, having a family history of osteoarthritis. If these factors are relevant to you and you currently have knee pain, it is advised that you can seek the guidance of a healthcare professional to get specific advice to your circumstance. Moving on, how can we then take care of our joints? This is applicable to those with or without current joint pain. Number 1, education. Being able to know what our joints do, why we should care for them, what is good and bad for our joints, of which I'll elaborate on 3 common myths that exist about joint health. The first myth is that excessive running is bad for your knees. This is a myth, and this statement is false. Due to the repetitive nature of running, it is understandable why many people may believe that this is true. However, there is growing research to show that regular running on a recreational distance up to marathon distances does not have a harmful effect, and instead has a protective effect against the development of knee osteoarthritis as compared to non-runners. Regular running, in fact, increases knee health and function in the long term, and it is only in the elite international runners who are running at very high volumes that may have an equivalent risk of developing knee osteoarthritis as compared to non-runners. Hence, for this group of people, targeted strengthening programs are especially important to reduce the risk of developing joint conditions. Overall, from current research, we can confidently say that running isn't bad for your knees if you currently do not have any discomfort. If you do have knee discomfort, running is something that is beneficial, but it is likely too much for your knees to handle at this point in time, and some form of rehab is needed first. As to how to carry out this benefit of running, I will elaborate more later. Myth number 2 is that scans are effective at predicting pain and function. This is false. Some people with knee pain may have seen a doctor and taken scans such as X-rays or MRI. On these scans, some people may or may not have visible changes to their knees, such as abnormal bone growths, joint space narrowing, but these changes alone are not indicative of joint conditions like knee osteoarthritis. What this means is that someone can have no changes in the scan but have lots of knee discomfort. And there can be someone with many changes in the scan but no knee discomfort. Scans should not be used in isolation when assessing individuals with knee pain. Do take note of this if you ever take a scan for your joint pain or discomfort. The third myth is that surgery is the only thing that can improve arthritis or improve joint conditions. This is false. The models used to explain about knee conditions like arthritis include wear and tear, whereby these models explain that because you do too much, your knee wears and tears and therefore you have knee pain. But this model and this way of thinking exists from many decades ago, and they are too simplistic which also brings about a belief that if you replace the knee joint or do some surgery on it, you will not have pain. Research has shown that this isn't true and that people with knee pain can improve a lot through conservative treatment, meaning to not go for surgery first. And it is recommended that surgery is the last resort if conservative treatment isn't effective. Okay, with those 3 myths in mind, I think it can give us a better understanding about joint conditions and joint pain, that actually you can do quite a fair bit to improve the condition before considering more invasive treatment ideas such as surgery. Second thing that you can do to improve and take care of our joints is nutrition. Since joints are part of it is bone, it's important and it's beneficial to have good calcium intake for strong bones. Some options include dairy products such as milk, cheese, and yogurt, and other good calcium sources are fish with edible bones like sardines, tofu, and dark green leafy vegetables like spinach and broccoli. Third thing that we can do to care for our joints is to exercise. Cardiovascular exercise and strengthening exercise. This is especially useful because if you exercise, you strengthen the muscles surrounding your bones and joints, which better support your body. And exercise also encourages natural cartilage repair, which is one part of your joint. When you exercise, do remember to warm up and cool down properly and not to just jump into the exercise itself. And do also remember to progress the amount that you exercise gradually. This is important to prevent any other injuries from occurring. Adequate recovery in the form of sleep, eating well-balanced meals are also important in overall joint health. During exercise, if you have any knee pain, when you do things like running, jumping, or ball sports, this is likely because the form of exercises are too high impact, they're too intense for your joints currently. What you can do instead is to still exercise but opt for more low impact activities such as biking, swimming, or aquatic exercise where you still do exercises but in the water. Some examples are like aquatic jogging where you jog in the water, or you do squats in the water, you do walking in the water. These forms of exercise take load off your joints, and eventually if you're able to progress well, you can move on to do higher impact exercises like walking, jogging, and strengthening exercises. The fourth way that you can care for your joints is to lose weight for those who are overweight or obese. This is because additional weight can be a cause for joint pain, and any amount of weight loss is likely to be beneficial. One can use the BMI calculator as a rough guideline for the appropriate weight loss. But of course, for more specifications and more specific advice, do seek a dietitian or a doctor's advice. And the fifth and final thing that you can do to care for your joints is activity modification. So for instance, you need to carry on with your work, or you need to carry on with a certain activity that causes you a lot of knee pain or a lot of pain in other joints. You can see whether there is a way to modify or adapt the activity so that it's less painful for you. For example, if knee pain comes on because you carry heavy loads when you do laundry or when you move items in the house, then do handle heavy loads with care. Try to have a better posture when lifting weights by squatting down, pick up the object and carry it close to your body rather than to bend your back and hold it far away from you. And where possible, you can slide the object rather than to lift it up. Or if your occupation consists of manual labor, you can also try discussing with your supervisors if you're able to make modifications, maybe do a bit more admin work or maybe do a bit more managerial work so that you can reduce the amount of manual labor you do while you do rehab for your knee. With that, I've come to the end, near the end of the sharing. And if you have any existing joint pain, do know that the above is general advice, and it will always be good to seek medical advice, especially if your pain has been getting worse or your pain has been lingering for a few weeks and nothing has really helped it to get better. Thank you all for listening. Wishing everyone a good week ahead, and let's continue to keep up the good work in managing ourselves physically and spiritually. Goodbye.
And thank you so much, Yuen Yu, for a wonderful segment of Health is Happiness. And I'm sure many people out there, because I think like 18% of our audience is 45 to 54. So there's going to be people like myself who's going to be going into the 50s to know about my joints and stuff like that too. But I hope that you guys will really, really enjoy this time. All right. So if you have any questions or anything else you want to give to Yuen Yu, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. She is definitely going to be answering them for you too. If you have any other questions you want to ask that she does an episode on, you could leave it in the email below for Health is Happiness. Okay, so there it is, guys. That is today's Wednesday podcast. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you have any questions or anything else, let me know. And most importantly, guys, enjoy your Wednesday service tonight, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
The Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive.